everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce today Pernilla Nordstrom, as we will be talking about a very interesting and important topic about women in business in Sweden. I think many of us can relate that Sweden is being seen as this role model for everyone, but is it as perfect as we think it may be, and what can we learn from Sweden? So I thought of introducing and inviting Pernilla today. We've met on LinkedIn. I'm just going to say a couple of words. We've met on LinkedIn. I used to live in Sweden, in Malmö, and I loved following Pernilla's feed. There's so much, Pernilla, you're sharing out to the world, so we can already pick up great insights from the research, from the events you're attending, and also from your own personal experience. So I thought, who better not to ask than a Swedish person themselves, a woman in tech, a woman in finance. So Pernilla, over to you. I wanted to give you the space to introduce yourself a little bit. What do you do, and your interest in this topic?
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's such a privilege to be here. You know, I take every opportunity to talk about women in tech, women in finance, and the gender equality challenges that we still see in Sweden and globally, of course. So yeah, I'm Pernilla Nordstrom. I am a teenage mom living in Malmö, as you said, Anna. I've been in the tech industry for 20 years or so, in different roles. But yeah, first of all, I'm a teenage mom. I have 2 daughters, and that is pretty much, you know, the drive and the reason for me being engaged, because I really truly would like them to have a more gender equal reality when they go out in the professional, you know, take the steps, leap into the professional industry and growing up and having the opportunity to choose whatever work they would like to do and grab, you know, every opportunity, no matter if they are girls or guys or hens or whatever. Exactly. Hens, you can't say hen in English, but you know, whatever pronunciation they would like to have, that's totally fine. But I just, you know, really passionate about having equal opportunities for everyone. And you know, for me, coming out in the tech industry 20 years ago, I had been studying for a long time and working and studying and doing a lot of different things. So I was in my 30s when I got out there and started working, or close to my 30s. But I was, you know, from the start used to being the only woman in the room, being in different tech roles. And then 2005, I started working as a consultant in IT and information security. And there were very few women in the team, in the teams. And also when I came out to meet the clients, they were all men, more or less. So I mean, from the start, I mean, I wasn't the manager, I wasn't the recruiting manager, but I tried to influence and make my voice heard wherever I could, and we, you know, started to increase the way we increase the population we were recruiting among, and looking into how can we change, you know, how can we change the job ads? How can we change the questions we are asking when recruiting new people to the teams, etc. So I mean, that was a long introduction, Anna. Sorry about that.
No, that's fantastic. No, that's fantastic, because it gives so much insight into what we can expect. So thank you for that.
Yeah. But I mean, so my background has been within the professional services. So I've been with the big 4 companies for 16 years. And then a year and a half ago, I decided to leave the role as consultant and go into a line manager role. So I'm working with Swedbank on in our group information security function at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I am, you know, in a role and in a position where I can continue work with our, you know, the people aspects. I can use my voice, and I get the opportunity to raise topics like this. I'm sharing our Swedbank Women in Tech network, where we are, you know, both internally but also externally, with, you know, together with other banks and other organizations in the market, trying to influence the development around gender equality in the tech industry. So yeah, but that's pretty much me. I've always been involved with this. I've always been this type of how do you say, boyish girl, where
Tomboy.
I've been, yeah,
Do you
exactly.
want to say that? Yeah.
I wanted to have it all. I wanted to do sports. I wanted to dress up. I wanted to be everything. And I never
Amazing.
felt really limited about being a girl. But I also took every opportunity to raise my voice when I saw that there were, injustice. And, when you came up in my teens, and all the harassment that started, that came around being a girl in the 13, 14, 15. So I've always been loud when it comes to these topics. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Pernilla, and I thank you so much for sharing their wholesome perspectives into your experience, and starting with being a teen mom of 2 girls and teenagers. And I'm a mom as well, of a boy, of a girl. Just entering, but I'm just having the first sight of teenagers creeping in, but I'm still in that happy zone.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know I have to cherish whilst it lasts, and I'm still the only one anyway, so I can totally relate. But it's also interesting to hear about when you first started and the experience you've had, and hearing from it. I mean, obviously I got a little bit more used to it now, but hearing from a Swedish person saying that you still have to be loud about it, that you still have to talk about it, it's very, very interesting and intriguing. So, kind of setting the scene, I'm quite glad you've mentioned hen, because when I first arrived to Sweden 2 years ago, well, almost 3 years ago now, and I did my Swedish course, I remember we had, you have she, you have he, so you have hun, han, but you also have hen, which is for those who don't identify or don't want to be identified by any of the genders. It was like, oh, wow, it is amazing. The language catches up with what we are discussing out there. So for me, this is like a fantastic example of how the society can progress and adapt to the language. So yeah, it was confirming everything I was thinking about Sweden. But then I came across you and others like you sharing things on internet, on LinkedIn. Their report, for example, Mycket gjort, mycket kvar, which is so much has been done, but so much still to do. That was from 2021. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was reading the Invisible Women, and all the good examples come from Sweden. Come on, what's going on? And then I'm a little bit laughing, but to practice my Swedish, obviously, I've watched Love at the First Sight, and there were 2 couples.
I love that as well.
There
That's
you
my
go. Guilty pleasure. Yeah, like I'm a sociologist. I love this kind of stuff because it gives you insight into the society in a way. And I was like, wow, there were 2 couples that actually argued about the gender. So there were 2 females who were very vocal, very bold. And I think that's one of the things I'm picking up. Like, I think that's my not scientifically proven anecdotal example, but I'm thinking what Sweden is doing, you can be much bolder to talk about those topics. But coming back to that program, the guys were like oblivious to why they were so vocal about it, passionate about it. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Why they don't get it? And I thought it would be more hand in hand. So from your personal experience and maybe data you've looked at, what has been done actually, but what is there to do, more to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one, because I mean, it all starts with us talking about this and talking about it on different levels. So I mean, going back again to being a teenage mom, do I hear that they talk enough about this at school? No, not at all, not at all. And some of the arguments that I hear, in my professional career, when we are talking about gender equality, is that, oh, the new generation, they are much smarter than us. And yes, they are, because, every generation are picking up on things. But when it comes to the gender equality, there is a lot of studies in Sweden showing that it's not obvious that the boys or the girls are aware about the gender equality that we experience in Sweden when it comes to, for example, in the workplace environment or things like that. And if they don't talk about that at school or talk about that among their friends and get aware things will just continue because the structures are still there. You know, the patriarchal structures that we have in our society, they're behind us and influencing us if we are aware of them and talk about them. So, I mean, of course, we need to continue influencing by talking out loud about it, but also to push, the organizations, the companies, the big corporates to do more. Because, I mean, it's one thing to talk about it,
yes,
and we
exactly.
do that a lot, and we've done that for so long. And also, of course, we do it taking action. And I've been working with amazing companies that are taking actions in different ways. But for me, it's all about starting measuring, starting calling out managers, starting setting KPIs on managers that they need to, that they are measured against when it comes to these things. Because, I mean, one thing that that's been following me around is that, okay, how can you complain about gender equality in Sweden when it looks like it does, in other countries, and how can you focus on that? But for me, I'm focused on the gender equality. It's not about Sweden, it's not about other countries, it's about gender equality, full stop. And if we just lean back and say that it's good enough in Sweden, we're top 5 among the World Economic Forum's gender equality gap index. Yeah, we are. I mean, it's good. We are on the top tier of the global companies. But if we stop talking about it, if we stop taking action, we will fall behind because other countries are doing much more and in a much higher pace than us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, it's about measuring and taking ownership, and also call out the top seniors in our companies to do more and act, and not just talk about it.
Yes, thank you for that. It resonates with the report. I think it was saying the Sweden may be at the place when it gets a little bit of plateau, like it's fine, so it's like let's move on with something else. And that was the risk that they identified on one hand. And on the other hand, it's very interesting to hear about the metrics, because that's one of those topics that everyone is very interested in, but also looks from different perspectives. Are we just setting up? So one of the challenges, and that goes with quotas, is if a KPI is about having more women, I don't know, in the board or in the high positions, then the backlash may be, oh, they are there only because of the gender. In your experience, have you seen that backlash, or what kind of metrics you came across? Are you experimenting with? Do you have any of those kind of insights to share?
I mean, that the argument that you are, put into a position because you're a woman, it's always there, and that's something that people need to address and talk about. But also, on the other hand, there are so much science and numbers and facts around showing that, women are qualified, and when we have gender equal management teams and boards, you get better profit and all that. We don't need to go into those numbers because that's very well known, and everyone has talked about that for many years.
Exactly.
So that's a fact. So that's not a matter of what I think or you think. That's a fact. But I mean, when it comes to metrics, I mean, if you put metrics out there, I mean, in your sustainability report or annual report, you need to stay put. You need to follow through. I mean, if you see companies that are using those metrics when they know they are going to meet them, but then remove them when they are not meeting them. For example, when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to ownership or the board or whatever metric they have decided to measure, then it's not serious. I mean, then it's just pinkwashing. That it's just a matter of showing off that we are, in a good position. So it's really important to call out those things, and if we are setting up metrics and measures, we need to follow through, even if it's uncomfortable when we are not meeting those targets. but I mean, it's super, super hard. I mean, it's a hard topic. And also, you know, I really would like to spend some time on the intersectionality perspective.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Because I mean, the discussion around gender equality tend to be a bit, how do you say, flat in a way when you're just watching women as one homogeneous group.
Yes.
And we're not, because
Yes.
we are women. We are also with different ethnicities. We have different sexual orientation and disabilities or neurodiversities that you and I have been talking about, and all those different things. And that makes us to complex human being as much as men.
Exactly.
And I mean, I have a few examples. I mean, I used to be in a diversity and inclusion group, an internal working group with one of my previous employers. And I mean, that group contained, I was representing the women.
Yeah.
And then we had people, you know, representing the different perspectives,
Right.
you know, from a discrimination law perspectives. And the group were mainly containing of men, and then myself, and then eventually there were more ladies introduced to the groups. And I was representing the woman, and that was just silly because, I mean, there were great efforts with this, and I mean, there was a good intentions with that, but it also gets, you know, it makes me into just my gender and not all the other complex things that I have that also make me, you know, feel looked down at, or, you know, discriminated or whatever. I mean, not me personally, but me as
a representation.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that is really important. I mean, it's a start to start talking about the gender equality, but then we need to expand it into the different perspectives as well, to understand the real challenges that women in different groups and backgrounds in our society, as well as other countries, of course, are facing on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a very, very important perspective. And I think as well, it sometimes gets lost in my opinion, it sometimes gets lost in why are we talking about those things. And the core of it is to be able to flourish. I know it's going to sound cliche, but flourish on what we bring as human beings to the workplaces. And I once started to think about talking about gender is like a more visible way of seeing what the invisible to others. But we can't stop there. We have to take that learnings and takeaways and observations into the whole aspect of how we are managers today, as you've mentioned, how we're leaders. And how do we promote and all those kind of things. So on that note, actually, you've mentioned being the only woman at the table, and I've been there. I've worked for tech companies as well, and I've been the only woman, or one of two. I was quite lucky; I was one of two in the room. So these are the nuances we often spot. That it's hard to convey to others. What is it to be the only one in the room? If you're happy to share, in your experience, being that the only one, how was it? What was it like to be the only one in the room as a Swedish woman in business?
You know, I mean, there are different perspectives on it, and I have, you know, been working as a consultant in a very male-dominated industry, and you know, both the tech industry and also focusing on financial sector. There have been many challenges, and I have had many different, you know, difficult situations with clients where I felt, you know, discriminated or down talked to just because I'm a woman, or you know, a combination of being a woman and a younger woman compared to the, you know, the seniors that I'm meeting. So I mean, there have been situations where I have left the room where, you know, there was one example where I was in a meeting with a client together with a even younger woman, more junior woman. We were working together as a team, and we were really, you know, badly approached by this client, and he didn't take us seriously. He was laughing. He was just a disaster, and we actually just left the meeting after 30 minutes, and then I escalated it to the auditor in charge, and then it went to the CFO, and it was a big deal. And then we in a few weeks times later we could come back and we could do the meeting again in a different way. And I have so many different things like that, where people are just making silly jokes around with a female aspect of it, or where people are putting labels on guys being like kärringar, the word in Swedish, which is terrible, and they are acting like old women. That's the baddest thing, worst thing you can say to a man in a certain context, I guess, if you're that type of male. Yeah. And I've had several of those situations where, I mean, most often I don't really find the words within the situation, even though I'm a witty person. I can be quite direct, but I always get so surprised, and not until afterwards I find the words and I want to go back. And,
I know what you're talking about so well.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been a few, and but there is another perspective as well. I mean, being one of a few successful women in a male context, that also means that I've been standing out, throughout my career, and people are noticing me, and that also, of course, that's a positive thing when it comes to getting, recognized, or getting, asked to get into a new position or things like that. So I can't just ignore that fact. That's also some, in every context where you are not fitting the norm, people see you. And sometimes they they appreciate it, and sometimes they don't. But nevertheless, I mean, standing out, it could be a positive thing as well, of course. But I also must say that it's been changing since I started 20 years ago. Yeah. I mean, the tech industry in Sweden and globally, of course, has been developing so much. So I mean, we can see from statistics that especially in the tech industry, we are taking big leaps when it comes to gender equality, and we do see more senior C-level women in tech companies and tech positions. And I must say that one of the reasons I decided to come to Swedbank was that Swedbank has a female CIO, running the IT and the digital environment on group level, and also the chief information security officer is a female. And for me, that was an important signal saying that we do focus on this in the bank. It's a prioritized topic, and there are some efforts put behind. It's not just by coincidence that we have these two powerful, very successful women running, two of the big tech parts of our organization. So I mean that really had an impact on me when deciding what would be my next step when I was offboarding myself from a consultancy business.
Oh, thank you for those examples. And representation is such a powerful thing, and I've seen so many examples of when it can be so empowering to others as well. It's when you see it, I think they say when you see it you believe it, right? So it's so important. And also I like in your example, and I understand that was from earlier in your career when there was this uncomfortable situations with the customer. It's great to have seen in your example that you could have raised that with their employer, and that was being taken care of in a certain way, even though that was like external with the client. So there could have been I can just imagine there are extra pressures in those relationships than when it happens internally. So
definitely, because it's a commercial relationship, and it's totally reliant on building great relationship with the clients to be able to be successful in those tasks, no matter if it's audit related or advisory related. Everything builds on human relationships and communication. So I mean, but with those specific examples, I mean, there has been a very strong commitment from management, which is great to see. I mean, I know there have been other examples as well, but not from my personal experience. So I mean, I've been very, felt very secure in those situations, but because that's also in an external context. So that, I mean, that's also, when I call out behaviors like that, the employer need to address that, because that's part of also the brand. It's part of what we are. How are we positioning our organization? We are we are a sustainable company. I'm not talking about Swedbank now. I'm talking about previous experiences. But if you come across as being modern, being in the forefront, building, working with the value-driven leadership and focusing on diversity, inclusion, etc., you can't back down on examples like that with the business, or you need to keep that integrity. So that's really important. But also, then on the other side of the coin is the internal work and what is going on that end. And I know you and I have been talking about that previously around, what's the price of being loud? Loud. I mean, I think I'm not that crazy person running around and picking fights everywhere, but you do get that stamp, being loud or being difficult, when you raise those uncomfortable topics or calling out. I mean, there was another example where we actually had put some measures, internal KPIs, saying that for each managerial position that's been recruited to internally, there need to be a man and a woman, at least. There need to be candidates from both genders representing, before you can go into a selection process. And I had a situation many years ago, so way back, but where we got a new manager in our team. And it was totally a closed process. There was no opportunity to apply for the position or anything. It was just, there was a selection and there was a person appointed. And I called it out and I said, so what happened with this, where we should have men and women represented in this process and everything? And they said, oh, we did have a female candidate. And I said, oh, that's I'm curious about hearing who that was, because we don't have that many senior women with that experience that could take on that role within the team. And they said, no, you were our female candidate. And I was just, oh, good. I didn't know. I didn't know the offer was on the table.
Oh, wow.
No. We know you wouldn't accept it because you live in Malmö and we want to have the manager sitting in Stockholm. So therefore you didn't get the question, but you were our female candidate. So tick on that box. Which is silly, of course, but that was way back. But I mean, I've had those situations, and when you do call out things like that, like I did at that time, you are seen as being difficult, because that's because then you put your managers on the spot. So, and that's never very appreciated, is it? So, yeah, I mean, I mean, from a gender perspective, I mean, we do know this is also fact. There's a lot of science around that when women talk like 25% of the meeting time, we are seen as dominating the meeting. I guess I'm one of those individuals that talk out loud and claim my space, and then I know that from time to time I've been seen as taking too much space, or using all the oxygen in the room, whatever you want to say about that. But it's also a matter, I mean, you talked about representation and the importance of role model. And every time I get a question, no matter if it's internal or external, do you want to come and talk about these things, or share your story, share your experience? I always try to do that, and I say yes, especially when it comes to internal things in my previous life, where the young professional women community want me to come and talk and share my story and my experience. I always did that, but then also from time to time I heard in secondhand that why is it always Pernilla? Why is she everywhere? I mean, don't we have any other that could And I really wanted more women to step up and take on that role and share their story and be, transparent about their challenges that they're facing and everything. But until then, I will say yes every time I get the question. So yeah, it is, when you are putting yourself on the spot there, you get some hits, and you people will see you as difficult, or they will see that you are just there because you like to hear your own voice or whatever. But that's the risk you're taking, of course.
Oh, thank you so much. This is just hitting with me so well, and thank you so much for raising that. I like to talk about the rebel in the organizations that we know, and there are books about it as well. We need the rebels in the organizations, and as you said, it's not about being petty or picking every single battle, but having that resilience, strength, and willingness and integrity. I think for me, it's also integrity. For me, that personally, that was always a sense of integrity, and the price is there for sure. But what I'm hearing from you as well, it keeps you driving. You can see their backlash, but you can also see their outcomes it brings. And working from HR, I had this privileged insight into the data, but also into people kind of leaning to me, I guess, I don't know. But I've heard from those women in tech that I worked with that even sometimes the smallest thing I would do on the floor, and I'm in HR, I'm not even like tech, but saying little things like, I don't know, making a mistake in English and saying, oh, English is not my first language, and laughing off. Some of them said that just hearing that from somebody else, another female, another foreigner, in front of everybody else, it was so powerful, and they would thank me. And so what I'm trying to say, we think about rebels as always those kind of shouting at everyone and saying you stupid. And this is not what we're talking about. This is about raising the voice, calling out. And sometimes the little things we do, even if we're small rebels, it already means a lot to people who sometimes they are not there yet, but it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for how to be a rebel in the organization?
Tip. No,
or lessons learned, maybe.
No, but what you just said, to pick the fights, of course. You don't need to take every fight, because then you will burn out, of course, because you will. I am that type of personality as well. So I easily get engaged and passionate, and I just go all the way and beyond. And that, that hits me personally very hard, because you just, drain yourself. So you need to pick the fights. But also to go, turn to your inside and just do your own assessment. What is important for me? I went to a really good leadership program with PwC a few years ago. It was a 1 year, top management, not top management, it's like future leadership program. I was, 41 at that time or something like that, but I was still perceived as a future leader. But it was a great 1 year program that, it was, split in 3 phases, but the first phases was all about looking into myself, my own core values, identify what are my drivers, what are my non-negotiables. So meaning, what can I live with, and what can I don't, what can I not negotiate with? What do I need to be, happy in life and be in balance and enjoy life, more or less, and both from a professional and personal perspective. And that was really, really valuable. So the first phase was all about that. Then it was about, leading myself. I had, it was all about self-leadership and understanding yourself. Then the next one was leading your team, and the third one was leading your client. But the first phase there, that was really to really do that soul searching and define and write it down, and also say it out loud to your managers, and that, because that was all part of the program, to really, articulate my leadership vision. What do I want to do with my management skills and my leadership career, and what can I not, accept as part of that. So that was really, really, so that's that's the main tip, I would say, just to have some proper conversations with yourself around what are your priorities and drivers in life, and try to explore those, and then map them towards how do you live your life today. And does that match, or are there major gaps? If there are, you need to take care of those, and also then define what are my non-negotiables, and then go for that, and then pick your battles based on that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening, there's I'm going to link it in the description below, because I know Brené Brown has on her website a brilliant exercise for finding your values. So she has a list of values, but also some guiding questions around exactly that. What are your main ones? What's non-negotiable, and so on. So thank you for sharing. I know we not always can go to this kind of training, but there are also resources already online that can help us. And people sometimes underestimate the value of those exercises and looking inwards. I was doing I'm doing, like, as part of my work, I do leadership programs as well for new leaders. And it was so interesting to hear some of them saying, oh, actually, I didn't realize that my role as a manager was to develop others and help them talk about the values. And it was like I don't know, not that I was very amazed that this is a revelation to some, but it's from this engineering side of work, when you're so used to tasks and deliverables. So I'm not blaming the person. And it's great that they come across exposure to those topics and actually try them out. And they, the first conversation I had with the one-to-ones already saw the value of having those conversations. They were like amazed and loving it so much. I was like, oh, all I had to do was talking to my employee. Yeah, sometimes it's a very starting point.
Your perception of what it means to be a leader and a manager. I mean, where do you get that inspiration from? I mean, of course, it all starts with the organization you're operating in, and what type of managers do you have around you, and what do they bring to the table, and what type of leadership style are they exercising? So, I mean, for me, it took, even though I have always had a strong opinion around, ethics and morals and being right and wrong and picking those fights when
I'm smiling because it just resonates.
Yeah, I mean, even though I had that very strongly inside of me, I did all those mistakes when I entered my first manager roles, because the role models I had around me were like very traditional male oriented managers, being very direct, being on top of everything, being very, you need to do this, you need to do that, and that's the way it's going to be. It had nothing to do with being a value-driven leader. So, I mean, when I entered those first roles, I was the same type of person. I was very direct. I was terrified, because I realized that I don't know everything. I'm not on top of it. But fake it till you make it, and see how that goes. And it didn't go very well, of course. And eventually I had to figure out, how do I get these two different persons that I pretty much ended up with, being Pernilla at work and being Pernilla at home, and they were the distance between those two roles were too big, and it was eating on me, and it was really hard. And I've been doing so many of these personality and behavioral tests, both going into new positions and part of different trainings. So I really know myself, and I've seen myself in all those different methods and models. But I mean, at one time I got this, this is the core Pernilla, this is the adjusted version of being, i.e. the person at work, and it was such a big difference. And it was from the DISC, the DISC model, and I was very red in that working context, and I realized that was too far away from who I really am. But it was just not until I was turning 40 or something like that I really understood that enough is enough, and I just need to be true to myself. And that is such a cliche. I totally understand that, but I just realized that I don't need to fit into some kind of norm or model around how I'm dressing, how I'm acting, how my I can use my voice when it comes to being a leader or a manager, or and trust myself and trust my inner view of how this should be managed or operated or whatever. So I mean, it's a tough one, because it's all about, what are the role models you have around you? What opportunities are you given as a new manager to soul search and to find your way of doing it? And the program I went to at PwC was called My Way, and that is a brilliant name of a leadership program. And it's also actually ended up with quite a few people deciding to leave PwC, not because it was a bad place, but just because that they did this journey during a year and realized that they wanted to do completely different or go in another direction, which is amazing in one way, because then people will leave eventually anyway, but that now they did it in a way that was very controlled, and they were sent off in a great path, even though it was outside the company that were paying for that training. So I mean,
I've actually seen studies about that, like when women, I think in the context of women, when women can leave organization after training because they realize that it could be done in a different way. So that's on one side, that just resonated, but on the other, again, probably getting in my HR experience, I was in an organization when there was a part of this conversation. It's natural that we sometimes think something else, that what organization can offer, our team can offer at this very moment may not be aligned. So we encourage you to go and explore with being open and not having that. I think it's an old mentality. You never come back. You never can come back to the organization once you left. Whereas I was part of those conversations, actually to go explore, gain new experiences, new insights, new perspectives, and we continue to be opening, welcoming, and inclusive. And we can benefit from it, few years down the line. So I've heard those conversations happening as well and seen them happening. And I'm actually very encouraged by that. I think that's all about this exposure, different experiences, tapping to the diversity and inclusion in that sense as well. So that doesn't have to be a bad thing, actually. But I think we've touched on diversity and inclusion being about, I'm just putting my thoughts into your my words into your thoughts, but I do think about it as a paradigm change, how we do leadership, and there is not only one way of being a leader anymore.
Of course,
and that's fantastic, but that requires some habits changing and finding new ways. So on that note, Pernilla, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about some practical stuff that organizations can do. I know you've been part of some hackathons. That's one of my favorite words. Any of those kind of initiatives, projects that you were part of, and you find actually it's a great thing to do as part of your D&I initiatives? It doesn't have to be hackathon. I just love hackathons. But
no.
It doesn't have to be that.
Good example. But I mean, I can just give you some brief on a thing that I'm really proud of, and that is very close in time as well. And that was, I told you I'm sharing the Swedbank Women in Tech network, and that was a re-established network, you could say. I mean, it was from the start, it was Swedbank Women in Cybersecurity, and then it expanded into tech, and we relaunched it earlier this year. And I was, selected as chair, and then we were just kicking off with the new board, and we were planning a lot of different activities, and we had this crazy idea in spring saying that let's do a full week of tech in the name of Swedbank Women in Tech. And we were just like, okay, there are a few months until then, so let's just go for it, and we will start small and see how it goes. But with me, it never stops at small. So we were just going all in with that. So the last week of September, we had Swedbank Women in Tech Week, where we had like 13 different events. We had spotlight sessions with tech ladies that were raising their hands saying that I want to participate, I want to use my voice, I want to share my story or talk about my passion, my techie area that I am an expert in. And we had people talking about the tech recruitment. We had a hackathon that was not related to the gender equality at all. It was different topics that are related to tech. and it was an opportunity for both men and women and everything in between to get engaged with the hackathon and work with from a design thinking methodology, ideating around 3 different challenges that we had set up, which were in the 3 topics of youth. How can we make use of technology to explore the youth as a client base? The second one was around how can we use tech to on the sustainability journey we are on, and the third one was around workplace collaboration. And that was what I wanted to come to, because the design thinking principles are really great, and there are there are a lot of toolkits around design thinking where you can ideate and run workshops in a much more efficient and effective way than we've done it traditionally. And it's not a rocket science at all. But I mean, that was a very, very fun, successful way of getting people together. We were creating teams based on the challenge they wanted to explore. So we had people, from all our home markets. We have a big Baltic operations, and then Sweden. And we had people from different teams from all over the bank, not just the traditional tech teams. So people that were interested in tech and wanted to explore, they could come and join. And they came up with such great solutions, really, really great solutions. We were, we were amazed in the jury. I was part of the jury there to just see what you can achieve in 1.5 days of focused work with a predefined methodology. And another example is that, I mean, I've started using the design thinking principles and some of those workshop methodologies when running both digital and analog workshops, physical workshops. And when we're doing it digitally, you can do it totally anonymously, so that you start with what are our main challenges within this specific topic we want to explore. Everyone just put their thoughts into a list. You can't see who has written this and that, so you're not biased by if you like Kalle, Pelle, Ulle, Greta, Sina, whatever. You can just watch. These are the challenges, and then you can vote for it, and everything is done silently, so there is not a lot of discussions around. I mean, and I've done a few of these examples, and that's a very efficient way of getting from A to Z to get the outcome, and get these are the 3 actions we are focusing on to solve this challenge, exploring, then going back and all that. It's an iterative process, but that is also a way to get people that are not naturally raising their voice in a context where you have other people that are loud or taking a lot of space, because here everyone has their voice and everyone can vote, and the votes are considered equally no matter what. So I mean, from a gender perspective, that could also be a way of getting getting the more quiet women to raise their voice and to influence the development of a specific topic that you're working on. So I mean, that's one way to not just to get away from those environments that sometimes are created in teams where you have a few really dominating people, not always with men, of course. It could be a dominating woman, but get away with that, from that, and get into a space where everyone can contribute, no matter if you're introvert, extrovert, or if you have different perspectives. You're all valued. And so I mean, and we ran this hackathon from a design thinking perspective. You can do it in so many different ways, and you don't need to have a methodology on it defined. You can just let team explore and do their own thing for a certain amount of time. But I mean, there are many different ways of try to break those old habits or the structures that you have that sits in the walls in a way,
Love those examples, and I like to call it hacking the dots. But in order to connect the dots, you have to hack to the dots first. And how can you bring that to the surface? And And again, my experience working for tech, I value it so much because I fall in love with design thinking. And because it's basically, as you just said, it's breaking out the barriers by design. So you don't have to preach to anyone about biases. You just design the process so that people can experience the true value of diversity for themselves, no matter the gender and everything else. So it's great to see that their organizations are doing it, and in an inclusive way. So it's not just for women, it's for men as well. So Pernilla, I know I definitely could talk forever about those things, but I think we've already covered very interesting points today, starting from, yes, Sweden may be ahead on stats and everything else. And you can see from your own 20 years of experience that changes in organizations, but doesn't mean the work is done. We have to, there's the generations to be taken care of. So we can't give up, and we have to have a little bit of that, not a little bit, we have to continue the work with dialogue, but with work as well. We talk about rebels, and I love that. I definitely have been considered sometimes that kind of rebel as well. We don't have to be big rebels, whatever that is that helps us raise the voice at the right moment. We should encourage that and support that. We talked about leadership, which is such an important thing to the organizations, and it's and the more I work internationally as well, like we are human beings wired in a certain way. So yes, there may be cultural differences, but we are coming through the similar challenges. So it's great to see again the work being done in that space, and we've given a lot of practical examples of what has been done. And I definitely encourage design thinking as well into everything we do, that or another way in which we can hack the dots, design and nudge inclusion in that way. So I know it's not exhausted, but that's already gives so much food for thought and so many takeaways. So thank you so much for that, Pernilla. And I actually wanted to finish off with a question, because we said in the report, mycket gjort, mest kvar. So much done. We need more to do. We talk about the rebels, but I wanted to put in between all of that the beautiful Swedish word lagom, which means, I think, put very simply, means the just right. Is there a lagom for diversity and inclusion? What's your takeaway on that one? Or should we just be rebels, actually? Continue to be rebels, or do we strive for lagom in that topic?
Not at all. I'm not a lagom person. We should continue until we cross the finish line here. And I talked about the World Economic Forum and the gender gap index that they are measuring every year. And according to that statistics, we won't be gender equal on a global level until 132 more years or so. So I mean, if we are going to speed up that development, lagom is not the way to go. We need to push. But I mean, of course, we need to integrate the gender equality activities with the overall diversity and inclusion work, and we need to see the intersectionality perspectives on these things, and we need to find a way to engage the men in this work as well. So I mean, we talked about role models. It's super important to have these male role models as well, getting engaged for real, not just standing there talking about it on an annual event or so, but get engaged with the actual work that we're doing. And I mean, I have so many examples of those male role models around me, both in Swedbank and in other areas. I'm mentoring a guy that is working with diversity and inclusion in a manufacturing company in Sweden, and he reached out and wanted to have someone to bounce ideas with and explore and exchange ideas and challenges. And I mean, that is awesome to see. He's working in an international company with a lot of cultural, challenges in the different sites and all that. And I mean, that is so, I appreciate those conversations so much, because that gives me, I mean, he comes from a different industry. He's a man, he has different perspectives, and it's a give and take all the time. And that is all about, it's all about exploring and understanding perspectives and listening and try ideas, go out and explore, and then, you know, iterate, go back to the design table,
Exactly.
go out and try again. And also, I mean, in our, you know, I've had, you know, mixed emotions around female networks, you know, for a few years, because I mean, some of the arguments against it is that, so we can't just sit women talking together. I mean, and you know, we need to go out and influence the male male part of the world as well. So you know, in our Women in Tech network we have at Swedbank, we, you know, we welcome everyone to get involved. So men, women, if you identify as them, they, him, it doesn't matter. Everyone is welcome that are sharing our vision around, you know, the idea, the crazy idea that that gender equality will make a better tech development of the tech industry, which is the focus we have in this network, of course. So I mean, and that's a really important message. We need to interact, we need to communicate, and we need to get the men on with us on this journey. Otherwise we won't succeed.
Exactly, it is so important, and I'm happy we are finishing with this note as well. It is so important, and again, I've seen as well those examples in my life around me, and that they are so valuable, and everyone will benefit from it, not only women. It is for a better society as a whole, and finishing off, it's for the better future for our children.
The most important of all.
Absolutely. It just my daughter the other day told me, "Mom, why do they always say girls power? Boys have powers too, don't they?" And I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, representations works."
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the boys, and how do we bring those gaps as well? So they are thinking, they're asking those questions. I can't imagine me asking those kind of questions when I was her age at all. And my son engages with this as well. So I am being helpful, but we have to do it right and try it. So thank you so much, Pernilla. That was such a pleasure, and so much that we've taken from this conversation. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your
Thank you for having me, Anna. It was such a pleasure talking to you. So, and yeah, I could go on forever and ever
me too,
having this conversations with you, but we'll continue offline then.
Exactly. Thank you so much.